The mechanic who saved an elderly woman from her burning house thought nothing of it. Later, he got a surprise that left him speechless. The neighborhood was modest but alive with character, a mix of older homes and small, tidy yards bordered by chain-link fences. Marcus Hill's home stood out, not because it was grand, but because of the warmth it exuded. A neatly trimmed lawn and a small wooden sign near the porch read, "The Hill Family, built with love." Inside, the house was quiet except for the occasional hum of an old refrigerator and the soft scratch of crayons against paper. Layla, Marcus's 8-year-old daughter, sat cross-legged on the floor, her curls bouncing as she concentrated on her drawing. Marcus, sitting at the kitchen table, was a man of quiet determination. He was tall and broad-shouldered, with hands calloused from years of working as a mechanic. His dark brown skin gleamed under the kitchen light, and his eyes, though often serious, softened whenever he looked at Layla. Life hadn't been easy for Marcus since his wife, Tasha, passed away 3 years ago. Balancing work, grief, and parenthood had tested him in ways he never imagined. But Layla was his anchor, her laughter and curiosity a constant reminder of why he kept pushing forward. "Daddy, does this look like a unicorn?" Layla held up her drawing, her face scrunched in thought. Marcus glanced at it, his lips twitching into a smile. The unicorn was a colorful blob with mismatched legs and a crooked horn. "It's perfect," he said, reaching for a screwdriver. "And once I fix your robot, it can guard that masterpiece." Layla giggled, climbing onto a chair beside him. "You're the best fixer, Daddy. Better than anyone at your shop." Marcus chuckled. "Don't let Mr. Langston hear you say that. He might give me more work." Their laughter filled the small kitchen, blending with the rhythmic ticking of a wall clock. It was these moments that made the struggles worth it, the simplicity of a child's love and the fleeting peace of a night at home. As Marcus worked, a faint rumble of thunder echoed outside. The rain had started earlier that evening, a steady drizzle that now intensified into a full-blown storm. He paused, his senses sharp. A subtle but acrid smell lingered in the air. Something burning. "Layla," he said, his tone suddenly serious. "Stay here, okay?" Layla frowned. "What's wrong?" "Probably nothing," he reassured her, grabbing his jacket. "But stay put, just in case." The weight of his words hung in the air as he stepped outside, the cold rain immediately soaking through his shirt. The sight that met Marcus's eyes sent a jolt of adrenaline through his body. 2 houses down, flames licked at the edges of the roof, their orange glow stark against the stormy night. Smoke billowed into the sky, the acrid smell mingling with the rain. Neighbors gathered on the street, their faces illuminated by the fire's eerie light. Some shouted in panic, while others frantically called 911. "Is anyone inside?" Marcus shouted as he approached the burning house. "Mrs. Hayes," a woman cried, clutching her bathrobe. "I think she's still in there." Marcus didn't hesitate. Evelyn Hayes was a widow in her 70s, known for her impeccable garden and cheerful wave whenever Marcus passed by. The fire roared like a living thing, and every instinct screamed for him to stay back. But the thought of leaving someone inside to perish spurred him forward. The heat was suffocating as Marcus kicked open the front door. Smoke rushed out, stinging his eyes and filling his lungs. He pulled his shirt up over his nose and stepped inside. "Mrs. Hayes," he called, his voice hoarse. The living room was already engulfed, flames climbing the walls and devouring furniture. Marcus moved quickly, his boots crunching over shattered glass and charred wood. A faint cough reached his ears, followed by a weak voice. "Help! Over here!" The sound came from near the staircase. Marcus pushed forward, his heart pounding. He found Evelyn slumped on the floor, her gray hair matted with sweat and soot. Her hands trembled as she reached out weakly. "I've got you," Marcus said, crouching down. "We're getting out of here." Evelyn was frail, her body shaking as Marcus lifted her into his arms. The heat was unbearable now, flames closing in from all sides. Navigating back through the house was like running a gauntlet. Smoke clouded Marcus's vision, and every breath burned his throat. He shielded Evelyn's face with his arm, his legs straining under her weight. As they neared the front door, a loud crack split the air, a burning beam collapsing just behind them. Sparks rained down, singeing Marcus's jacket. The cool rush of rain greeted him as he stumbled out onto the lawn, Evelyn still in his arms. Neighbors rushed to help, their shouts blending with the distant wail of sirens. Marcus laid Evelyn gently on the grass, coughing as fresh air filled his lungs. Paramedics arrived moments later, tending to her and ushering Marcus toward an ambulance. "You're hurt," one of them said, gesturing to the burns on his hands and arms. "I'm fine," Marcus insisted, his voice gravelly. "Take care of her." Evelyn, though shaken, was conscious and breathing. Her eyes met Marcus's, glistening with gratitude. You saved me," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Marcus nodded. "You're going to be okay, Mrs. Hayes. Just hang in there." As the paramedics loaded her into the ambulance, Evelyn reached for his hand. "I won't forget this," she said, her grip surprisingly firm. "I owe you everything." Marcus offered a faint smile. "You don't owe me anything. I just did what anyone would do." But Evelyn's eyes held a conviction that told him she wouldn't let it end there. By the time Marcus returned to his house, the rain had slowed to a drizzle. He found Layla waiting anxiously by the window, her face pressed against the glass. "Daddy!" she cried, running to him as he stepped inside. "Are you okay?" "I'm fine, sweetheart," he said, crouching down to hug her. "You smell like smoke," she said, wrinkling her nose. "What happened?" Marcus hesitated, brushing a hand over her curls. "Just helped someone out of a sticky situation." Layla's eyes widened. "Did you save them? Like a superhero?" Marcus laughed softly. "Something like that." As he tucked her into bed later that night, he couldn't help but wonder how the events of the evening might ripple through their lives. In the quiet stillness of his bedroom, Marcus sat on the edge of his bed, staring at his soot-covered hands. The adrenaline had worn off, leaving a dull ache in his muscles and a swirl of thoughts in his mind. He had no idea that the woman he saved would soon bring more change into his life than he ever imagined. The hospital room was quiet except for the rhythmic beep of the heart monitor. Evelyn Hayes lay propped up on the bed, her frail figure swathed in crisp white sheets. Though her face was pale and her breathing labored, her spirit was far from broken. She clutched a mug of lukewarm tea, her eyes drifting to the bouquet of flowers on the bedside table. A handwritten card from her neighbors accompanied it, expressing relief at her survival. But Evelyn's thoughts lingered on the man who had saved her life. The door opened softly, and a tall, impeccably dressed man entered. His dark hair was neatly combed, and his sharp features mirrored a seriousness that rarely wavered. "Mother," he said, his tone a mix of relief and concern. "How are you feeling?" Evelyn's face brightened. "Richard, my boy, you're here." "Of course I'm here," Richard replied, pulling up a chair. "When the hospital called, I came as soon as I could." Evelyn placed a hand over his. "I'm fine, darling, thanks to a remarkable man. Marcus Hill. He pulled me out of that fire when no one else would." Richard frowned. "Hill? The firefighter?" Evelyn shook her head. "Not a firefighter. Just a neighbor. A good man." Richard leaned back, his expression skeptical. "You've always had a soft spot for people, Mother, but let's not get carried away. I'll make sure he's compensated appropriately." Evelyn's eyes narrowed. "Compensated? Richard, he risked his life for me. You don't repay that with a check." Determined to thank Marcus properly, Evelyn convinced Richard to take her to meet him once she was discharged. Days later, the sleek black car pulled up outside Marcus's modest home. Richard glanced at the peeling paint on the porch and the creaky steps with thinly veiled disdain. "This is the place?" he asked, raising an eyebrow. Evelyn shot him a pointed look. "Don't you dare judge." Evelyn, now steady on her feet with the aid of a cane, knocked firmly on the door. A few moments later, Marcus opened it, his expression shifting from surprise to warmth. "Mrs. Hayes," he said, stepping aside to let her in. "You're looking much better." "Thanks to you," Evelyn replied, her voice brimming with gratitude. Marcus glanced behind her, his eyes falling on the sharply dressed man standing in the doorway. "This is my son, Richard," Evelyn said. "He insisted on coming to meet you." Richard extended a hand. "Marcus Hill. I've heard quite a bit about you." Marcus hesitated before shaking it. "All good things, I hope." As they stepped inside, Richard couldn't help but take in the surroundings. The house was small but well kept, with family photos lining the walls and a faint smell of something sweet wafting from the kitchen. Layla bounded into the room, her curls bouncing. She stopped short when she saw the visitors. "Daddy, who are they?" she asked, her curious eyes fixed on Evelyn. Marcus crouched down beside her. "This is Mrs. Hayes. Remember the lady I told you about? The one I helped during the fire?" Layla nodded, her face lighting up. "You're the one Daddy saved. Are you okay now?" Evelyn chuckled. "I'm much better, thanks to your daddy." Richard watched the interaction silently, his sharp gaze softening slightly as he observed the easy warmth between Marcus and his daughter. The offer. As they sat in the living room, Evelyn turned to Marcus, her expression serious. "I can't thank you enough for what you did," she said. "You saved my life." Marcus waved it off, his tone modest. "I just did what anyone would have done." "No," Evelyn said firmly. "Not everyone would run into a burning house. You're a rare kind of person, Marcus." Richard cleared his throat. "Which is why we'd like to offer you something in return." Marcus frowned. "That's not necessary." "Please," Evelyn interjected, shooting Richard a glance. "This isn't about charity. It's about showing gratitude. Let us help you in some way." "I appreciate it, really," Marcus said. "But I'm not looking for a handout. I've got everything I need. A shared meal." Determined to forge a connection, Evelyn offered to cook dinner for Marcus and Layla. Marcus hesitated but eventually agreed, curious about the woman who was so insistent on showing her gratitude. The following weekend, Evelyn returned with Richard, this time armed with groceries and a recipe book. Marcus watched in amusement as Evelyn took over his kitchen, Layla trailing behind her, fascinated by the process. Richard, meanwhile, sat at the table, scrolling through his phone. "You don't cook much, do you?" Marcus asked, sitting across from him. Richard smirked. "I've got people for that." Marcus chuckled, shaking his head. "Figures." Their conversation started awkwardly but gradually found common ground. Richard was surprised by Marcus's sharp wit and practical intelligence, while Marcus began to see glimpses of humanity beneath Richard's polished exterior. A glimpse of Marcus's struggles. As they ate, Richard noticed small details around the house, a crack in the window frame, the slightly worn cushions on the couch. "You do all the repairs yourself?" Richard asked. "Yeah," Marcus replied. "I run a garage, so I'm used to fixing things." Richard nodded, filing the information away. Evelyn's reflection. Later that evening, as Evelyn and Richard drove home, she turned to her son. "He's special, Richard. You can see it, can't you?" Richard sighed. "He's a good man, Mother. I'll give you that. But good men don't always make it in this world." "Maybe not," Evelyn said. "But sometimes the world needs a reminder of what goodness looks like." Evelyn's visits. Evelyn's visits to Marcus and Layla became a regular occurrence. Every few days she would arrive at their modest home, a tin of cookies or a basket of groceries in hand, claiming she just happened to have extras. Marcus quickly realized this was her way of trying to repay his kindness, though he never once made her feel unwelcome. Layla adored Evelyn, often calling her Grandma Evie. The nickname stuck, much to Evelyn's delight. One afternoon, Evelyn brought a board game, much to Layla's excitement. Candyland, Layla squealed, pulling the colorful box out of the bag. Daddy's terrible at games, but maybe you'll win, Grandma Evie. Marcus raised an eyebrow, feigning offense. Terrible? I let you win. Evelyn laughed as they all sat down around the coffee table. The game unfolded with laughter and playful accusations of cheating, and by the end, even Marcus was grinning ear to ear. Richard's hesitation. While Evelyn integrated seamlessly into Marcus and Layla's lives, Richard remained on the periphery. Though he accompanied his mother occasionally, his visits were marked by brief, polite conversations and a constant sense of distance. One evening, after dropping Evelyn off at Marcus's house, Richard lingered in the car, his gaze fixed on the porch where Marcus and Layla were waving goodbye to Evelyn. "You could come in, you know," Evelyn said, sensing his hesitation. "I'm not sure they'd want me there," Richard replied. Evelyn frowned. "That man saved my life, Richard. And that little girl, she reminds me of you when you were young. Don't you think they deserve more than just a passing hello?" Richard sighed, running a hand through his neatly combed hair. "I'm not good at this, Mother. Connecting with people who aren't in my world." Evelyn placed a hand on his arm. "Maybe it's time you learned." Breaking the ice. A few days later, Richard made an effort. He arrived at Marcus's house alone, carrying a bottle of wine. Marcus answered the door, his eyebrows rising in surprise. "Richard," he said, "didn't expect to see you here." "I thought I'd stop by," Richard said, holding up the bottle. "A peace offering, of sorts." Marcus chuckled and stepped aside. "Come on in. I can't promise anything fancy to go with that, though." Richard entered, his polished shoes clashing with the worn but cozy interior of the house. He noticed Layla sitting on the couch, coloring in a new book Evelyn had given her. "Hi, Mr. Richard," she chirped. "Hello, Layla," Richard said, his tone softening. Marcus gestured to the kitchen. "I've got some leftover stew if you're hungry." Richard hesitated. "I don't want to impose." Marcus smirked. "I think you'd survive one meal cooked by a mechanic." The meal was simple but hearty, and as they ate, the conversation flowed more naturally than either of them expected. Over time, Richard began to see Marcus not just as the man who saved his mother, but as someone with depth, intelligence, and an unshakable moral compass. One evening, as they sat on the porch, Marcus spoke about his late wife, Tasha. "She had a way of making everything feel easier," Marcus said, his voice tinged with nostalgia. "Losing her, it broke me for a while. But Layla, she gave me a reason to keep going." Richard listened intently, his usual guarded demeanor softening. "I've never been married," he admitted. "Never found the time, or the right person." Marcus glanced at him. "You've got everything a person could want. Money, success. What stopped you?" Richard sighed. "Maybe I've spent too much time chasing what I thought mattered. Sometimes, I wonder if I've missed the things that really do." Richard's bond with Layla. Layla's infectious energy eventually won Richard over. She would drag him into games, proudly show him her drawings, and pepper him with questions about his work. "Do you have a robot?" she asked one day, her eyes wide with curiosity. Richard chuckled. "Not exactly. But I work with some pretty smart machines." "Like my daddy's tools?" "Smarter than that," Richard replied with a grin. "But your dad's tools are pretty important." Marcus overheard the exchange and smiled. Seeing Layla and Richard bond filled him with a cautious hope that this unlikely connection might grow into something meaningful. Evelyn's wisdom. Evelyn continued to act as the glue that brought them together. One evening, as Marcus walked her to her car, she paused and turned to him. "You've been good for Richard, you know," she said. Marcus raised an eyebrow. I think it's the other way around. Evelyn shook her head. My son. He's brilliant, but he's spent his life in a bubble. Meeting you and Layla, it's opened something in him. And for that, I'm grateful. Marcus smiled faintly. He's a good man, Evelyn. Just needs to get out of his own way. A community moment. To show his gratitude, Marcus invited Richard and Evelyn to a community barbecue organized by the local church. The event was lively, with kids running around, music playing, and the smell of grilled food filling the air. Richard, out of his element at first, soon found himself chatting with Marcus's neighbors and even helping to serve plates. Evelyn mingled effortlessly, her warmth endearing her to everyone she met. When Richard watched Layla win a sack race and rushed to Marcus with her trophy, something shifted in him. He saw a kind of joy and connection that had eluded him in his world of boardrooms and luxury. Closing scene. Seeds of friendship. As the evening wound down, Richard and Marcus sat by the fire pit, the stars twinkling above them. "Thank you for inviting us," Richard said. "I needed this more than I realized." Marcus nodded. Sometimes, all it takes is slowing down to see what really matters. Richard glanced at him. "You ever think about doing more? Beyond the garage, I mean. You've got the kind of mind that could do a lot of good in other places." Marcus chuckled. "I've thought about it. But for now, I'm just focused on raising my daughter and keeping things steady." Richard's gaze lingered on Marcus for a moment, an idea forming in his mind. "Well, if you ever want to try something different, let me know," he said. Marcus raised an eyebrow. "I'll think about it." As the fire crackled between them, the foundation of an unlikely friendship began to solidify, a connection that would soon lead to opportunities neither of them could have imagined. Marcus's struggles. Life at Marcus's garage was as demanding as ever. The shop, a small, weathered building on the edge of town, had been his lifeline for nearly a decade. With only 2 other employees, a young apprentice named Darnell and a seasoned mechanic named Eddie, Marcus did his best to keep the business running. But times were tough. The rise of chain auto repair shops and online marketplaces selling parts at rock-bottom prices had chipped away at his customer base. Late one evening, after finishing a long day of repairs, Marcus sat at his desk in the cramped office, staring at a stack of overdue bills. The numbers didn't add up. Between paying his employees, keeping the lights on, and supporting Layla, the shop's future looked bleak. Eddie knocked on the door, peeking in. "Boss, you okay?" "Yeah," Marcus lied, quickly shuffling the papers out of sight. Eddie frowned but didn't push. "Well, we're locking up. See you tomorrow?" "Yeah, see you tomorrow," Marcus said, though uncertainty weighed heavily on his words. The breaking point. A week later, Marcus received a letter from the bank. His loan payments were overdue, and the garage was at risk of foreclosure. The reality hit him like a punch to the gut. The garage wasn't just a business. It was his connection to the community and the way he provided for Layla. Losing it felt unthinkable. That night, as he sat in his kitchen, Layla came up to him, holding a crayon drawing of a car with the words "Daddy's Garage" scrawled at the top. "This is for you," she said, her eyes shining with pride. "So you can hang it at work." Marcus forced a smile, his throat tightening. "Thanks, baby girl. I love it." But as she skipped off to bed, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was failing her. A conversation with Evelyn. During one of Evelyn's visits, Marcus finally opened up about his struggles. "I've been trying to make it work," he admitted, sitting on the porch with her. "But the garage. I don't know how much longer I can hold on." Evelyn placed a comforting hand on his shoulder. "You don't have to do this alone, Marcus." "I'm not looking for charity," Marcus said firmly. "It's not charity," Evelyn said. "It's support from people who care about you. Don't let pride keep you from accepting help." Her words lingered with Marcus long after she left. Richard's offer. The next day, Richard showed up at the garage unannounced, dressed in his usual tailored suit but looking surprisingly at ease in the gritty, oil-stained setting. "Richard," Marcus said, surprised. "What are you doing here?" "Evelyn mentioned you might be having some challenges," Richard said, glancing around the shop. "Thought I'd stop by and see if I could help." Marcus crossed his arms. "I appreciate the concern, but I've got it under control." Richard raised an eyebrow. "Do you? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you're drowning." The bluntness of his words stung, but Marcus couldn't deny their truth. "Look," Richard continued, softening his tone, "I'm not here to throw money at you. But I see potential in you, Marcus. You're smart, hard-working, and you've got the kind of integrity that's rare in business." Marcus frowned. "What are you getting at?" Richard smiled. "Come work for me. I'll give you a management position at one of my companies. Good salary, benefits, and the chance to make a real impact. You won't just be fixing cars. You'll be leading people." Marcus's jaw tightened. "I don't know, Richard. This garage, it's my life. I can't just walk away from it." "You're not walking away," Richard said. "You're stepping forward. Think about it. Not just for you, but for Layla. Wrestling with the decision." That night, Marcus sat in the quiet of his living room, staring at the job offer Richard had sent over. It was generous, far more than he'd ever earned at the garage, and came with opportunities he'd never imagined. But the idea of leaving the garage, of letting go of something he'd built with his own hands, felt like a betrayal of everything he stood for. Layla wandered into the room, rubbing her eyes. "Daddy, why are you still awake?" "Just thinking, baby girl," he said, pulling her onto his lap. "About the garage?" she asked, her voice small. Marcus hesitated, then nodded. "You always tell me to try new things," she said, looking up at him. "Maybe this is your new thing." Her words, simple and sincere, struck a chord. Accepting the opportunity. The next day, Marcus called Richard. "I'll take the job," he said. Richard's voice was warm with approval. "You won't regret it, Marcus." Marcus spent the next week tying up loose ends at the garage. He spoke to Eddie and Darnell, ensuring they had opportunities elsewhere, and packed up the few personal items he kept in the office. On his last day, as he locked the door for the final time, he felt a mix of sadness and anticipation. A new beginning. Marcus's first day in his new role was both exhilarating and overwhelming. Richard introduced him to the team, a group of professionals from various backgrounds, and tasked him with managing a critical project for one of the company's subsidiaries. Though the learning curve was steep, Marcus quickly proved himself. His ability to connect with people, solve problems, and think creatively earned him respect among his colleagues. Layla's pride. At home, Layla was thrilled to see her dad in a suit for the first time. "You look like a movie star, Daddy," she said, giggling. Marcus chuckled. "Just trying not to embarrass myself out there." "You'll do great," Layla said confidently. "You always do." Closing scene. A step forward. One evening, as Marcus and Richard shared a drink after a long day, Richard raised his glass. "To new beginnings," he said. Marcus clinked his glass against Richard's. "And to not forgetting where you came from." Richard nodded, a hint of a smile playing on his lips. "You've got a way of keeping me grounded, Marcus. Don't stop." As they sat together, the foundation of a partnership and a friendship grew stronger, setting the stage for the challenges and triumphs to come. Marcus's first days. Marcus stepped into the sleek, glass-walled office building with equal parts excitement and apprehension. The buzz of activity surrounded him, employees hustling between meetings, the hum of computers, and the faint smell of coffee lingering in the air. He adjusted his tie, the stiff fabric foreign and uncomfortable against his neck. It had been years since he'd worn one, and it felt like a noose. Richard met him in the lobby, his usual air of calm authority giving Marcus a sense of reassurance. "Nervous?" Richard asked as they walked toward the elevators. A little, Marcus admitted. This is a long way from my garage. Richard smirked. You'll adapt. You've got the skills, Marcus. Now you just have to trust yourself. The team. Richard introduced Marcus to his new team. Jenna, a no-nonsense project manager with a sharp wit and a knack for organization. David, a young and ambitious analyst who seemed eager to impress. Priya, a software engineer with a quiet confidence and a reputation for solving tough problems. Each greeted Marcus politely, though he sensed a hint of skepticism from Jenna. "So, you're the new manager," she said, raising an eyebrow. "What's your background?" "Spent a lot of years fixing things," Marcus replied with a small smile. "Let's see if that applies here too." Navigating the corporate world. The first few weeks were a whirlwind. Marcus immersed himself in reports, attended endless meetings, and familiarized himself with the intricacies of the business. Learning curve. The jargon-heavy discussions sometimes left Marcus feeling out of place. Words like synergy and ROI weren't part of his vocabulary at the garage. Building trust. Marcus focused on listening and learning from his team, often staying late to catch up on concepts he didn't understand. Hands-on problem solving. When the team faced a technical issue with one of their systems, Marcus instinctively rolled up his sleeves and helped Priya troubleshoot. His practical approach earned their respect. Jenna approached him after one particularly productive day. "You've got a different way of doing things," she said. "It's refreshing." Marcus grinned. "I'll take that as a compliment." Subtle prejudices. Despite his growing confidence, Marcus couldn't ignore the subtle prejudices he encountered. In a room full of executives, his dark skin and blue-collar background set him apart. During one meeting, a senior manager dismissed one of Marcus's ideas with a condescending tone. "Stick to what you know," the man said. Marcus clenched his jaw but remained calm. "What I know is how to fix problems. And this idea could do exactly that if you give it a chance." Richard, who had been observing silently, spoke up. "Marcus is right. Let's move forward with his suggestion." The room fell silent, and the manager begrudgingly conceded. After the meeting, Richard pulled Marcus aside. "You handled that well," he said. "But if you ever need backup, don't hesitate to call me out." Marcus nodded, grateful for the support. The home front. At home, Layla was thriving. She often peppered Marcus with questions about his new job. "Do you have a big office, Daddy?" she asked one evening, her eyes wide with curiosity. "It's not that big," Marcus replied, smiling. "Do you have a robot assistant?" Marcus chuckled. "Not yet, but I'll put in a request." Layla giggled, then pulled out her homework. "You'll do great, Daddy. You always do." Her unwavering faith in him was a constant source of motivation. Earning respect. One of Marcus's first major assignments was to streamline a logistics project that had been plagued by delays. He approached the challenge with the same mindset he used at the garage, breaking it down into manageable pieces and involving his team in finding solutions. During a brainstorming session, Marcus encouraged everyone to share their ideas, no matter how unconventional. "Sometimes the simplest fix is the best one," he said. Priya suggested a software upgrade that the company had overlooked, and Marcus pushed for its implementation. Within weeks, the project was back on track, earning praise from the higher-ups. Bonding with Richard. Marcus and Richard's relationship continued to grow, their conversations often delving beyond work. One evening, after a late meeting, they shared a quiet moment in Richard's office. "You know," Richard said, swirling a glass of whiskey, "I've always admired people who can build something with their hands. My world, it's all numbers and theories. But you make things real." Marcus leaned back in his chair. "It's not that different. You're building too. Just using different tools." Richard smiled. "Maybe. But I could use more of your perspective. A community visit." On a rare day off, Marcus brought Richard to his old neighborhood for a community event. The barbecue was lively, with kids running around, music playing, and the smell of grilled food filling the air. Richard stood out in his tailored clothes, but he quickly adapted, shaking hands and engaging in conversations. At one point, a local teen approached Marcus. "Mr. Hill, are you still teaching people about cars?" the boy asked. "Not as much these days," Marcus said, smiling. "But if you ever want to learn, come by. I'll make time." Richard watched the exchange, his expression thoughtful. Later, he said, "You have a way of inspiring people, Marcus. We need more of that." Closing scene. A new perspective. That evening, as Marcus sat on his porch, reflecting on his journey, Richard called him. "I've been thinking," Richard said. "What if we start a mentorship program? Something to help people like that kid you talked to today." Marcus smiled, the idea sparking excitement. "I like it. Let's make it happen." As the call ended, Marcus felt a renewed sense of purpose. He wasn't just navigating a new world, he was helping to shape it. A new responsibility. Marcus's reputation in the company was steadily growing. After his success with the logistics project, Richard tasked him with a new challenge, overseeing operations for a struggling subsidiary, Grayson Manufacturing. "It's a mess," Richard said during their briefing. "Delays, cost overruns, employee turnover, you name it. I need someone I can trust to turn it around." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "And you think that's me?" "I know it's you," Richard replied firmly. The confidence in Richard's voice filled Marcus with both pride and apprehension. He accepted the assignment, determined to rise to the occasion. Arriving at Grayson Manufacturing. Grayson Manufacturing was a stark contrast to the polished corporate offices Marcus had grown accustomed to. The plant was outdated, with flickering fluorescent lights and equipment that looked like it hadn't been serviced in years. The workers were skilled but frustrated. Many expressed concerns about management decisions, inadequate resources, and unsafe working conditions. Marcus spent his first week observing, asking questions, and listening to their grievances. It became clear that the issues stemmed from deeper systemic problems, including mismanagement and budget cuts that prioritized profits over people. "Feels like no one cares about us," one worker said. "We're just numbers on a spreadsheet." Marcus nodded thoughtfully. "That's going to change." Unearthing the truth. As Marcus dug deeper, he uncovered troubling discrepancies in the company's financial records. Large sums of money were being funneled into vague operational expenses, and the numbers didn't add up. Determined to get answers, Marcus requested additional reports from the accounting department. He also noticed several high-ranking managers avoiding his questions or giving evasive responses. One evening, while reviewing the documents in his office, he stumbled upon an invoice tied to a shell company that didn't exist. The realization hit him like a punch to the gut. Someone was siphoning money from the company. Confiding in Richard. Marcus called Richard the next morning, requesting a private meeting. "I found something," Marcus said, handing him the documents. Richard's expression darkened as he scanned the pages. "This is serious." "I know," Marcus said. "And if we don't act on it, it's going to sink Grayson, and hurt a lot of good people in the process." Richard leaned back, his jaw tight. "Leave this with me. I'll handle it." Facing backlash. Word spread quickly that Marcus had raised concerns about the financial irregularities. Some managers at Grayson began treating him with open hostility, and whispers of distrust filled the halls. "You're stepping on toes, Hill," one supervisor warned him. "Might want to watch your back." Marcus met the warning with calm resolve. "I'm not here to make friends. I'm here to do what's right." The confrontation. Richard called an emergency meeting with the executives overseeing Grayson Manufacturing. Marcus was invited to present his findings. As he laid out the evidence, the room grew tense. Several executives shifted uncomfortably, while others exchanged nervous glances. One senior manager, a man named Caldwell, interrupted. "These accusations are baseless. You're wasting our time." Marcus locked eyes with him. "If they're baseless, then you shouldn't mind an independent audit." Richard's voice cut through the tension. "There will be an audit. Effective immediately." Caldwell's face reddened, but he said nothing. The fallout. The audit revealed widespread corruption. Several executives, including Caldwell, were implicated in the embezzlement scheme and promptly fired. Richard addressed the employees at Grayson, assuring them of sweeping changes to restore integrity and rebuild trust. Marcus was commended for his role in exposing the corruption, though he remained humble about the recognition. "This wasn't about taking people down," Marcus said during a meeting with the workers. "It was about doing what's right, and making sure you all get the support and respect you deserve. Building a better culture." With the corruption rooted out, Marcus focused on revitalizing Grayson manufacturing, investing in resources. He secured funding to repair outdated equipment and improve safety measures. Empowering workers. Marcus implemented programs to involve employees in decision-making, fostering a sense of ownership and pride in their work. Rebuilding trust. He held regular town hall meetings to address concerns and provide updates, creating a transparent and inclusive culture. Over time, the plant transformed into a thriving operation. Productivity soared, and employee morale reached new heights. Layla's perspective. At home, Marcus shared some of his experiences with Layla, simplifying the story for her understanding. "Did you catch the bad guys, Daddy?" she asked one evening. Marcus chuckled. "Something like that. But the important thing is, we fixed the problems." Layla beamed. "You're like a real-life superhero." Her words filled Marcus with pride. If nothing else, he wanted to be the kind of man his daughter could look up to. A turning point for Richard. The scandal at Grayson forced Richard to reevaluate his leadership and the values guiding his company. One evening, as he and Marcus shared a quiet moment in his office, Richard said, "You've changed the way I see things, Marcus." "How so?" Marcus asked. "I used to think success was all about numbers, profits, growth, expansion. But you've shown me that it's about people. About doing what's right, even when it's hard." Marcus smiled. "Guess we're both learning something." A step forward. Richard announced plans to launch a new initiative inspired by Marcus's work, a mentorship program aimed at developing leaders from diverse backgrounds and underprivileged communities. "I want you to help me lead it," Richard said during a meeting. Marcus hesitated. "Are you sure I'm the right guy for this?" "You're exactly the right guy," Richard said. "This program is about giving people like you, and me, a chance to make a difference." Closing scene. A moment of reflection. That evening, as Marcus sat on his porch, watching Layla play in the yard, he felt a profound sense of purpose. He had come a long way from the man who fixed cars in a small garage. And while the journey hadn't been easy, every challenge had shaped him into the leader and father he aspired to be. As the stars emerged in the night sky, Marcus smiled to himself. This was just the beginning. The mentorship program begins. The mentorship program, dubbed Horizons, was unveiled with much anticipation. Its mission was straightforward but profound: to empower individuals from underserved communities by equipping them with the skills, connections, and resources needed to succeed in leadership roles. Richard placed Marcus at the helm, trusting him to guide the initiative with the same integrity and determination that had turned Grayson Manufacturing around. "Don't overthink it," Richard advised during their first planning session. "Just do what you've always done. Help people find their potential." Marcus's role involved designing workshops focused on leadership, problem-solving, and practical skills, partnering with local schools, colleges, and community organizations to identify potential ments, building a team of mentors, including professionals from Richard's company and leaders Marcus knew from his old neighborhood, recruiting ments, The first class of Horizons Ments ranged from ambitious college students to individuals looking to change careers. Each brought a unique story, united by a desire to overcome barriers and achieve their goals. Amira, a single mother with a passion for coding, dreamed of becoming a software engineer but lacked formal training. Jamal, a talented artist, wanted to start his own graphic design business but struggled with the logistics of entrepreneurship. Tyrone, a former mechanic like Marcus, hoped to transition into management but felt held back by self-doubt. During their first group meeting, Marcus shared his story, emphasizing the importance of resilience and authenticity. "I wasn't handed this role," he said. "I earned it by showing up, working hard, and staying true to myself. And I believe each of you can do the same." His words resonated deeply, inspiring the group to embrace the program's challenges. Layla's involvement. Layla, now 9 years old, was Marcus's biggest cheerleader. She often sat in on his planning sessions at home, doodling in her notebook while he prepared presentations or reviewed mentee applications. One evening, as Marcus practiced his speech for an upcoming Horizons event, Layla interrupted with a question. "Daddy, what's a mentor?" Marcus smiled. "A mentor is someone who helps you learn and grow. Kind of like how I help you with your homework." Layla nodded thoughtfully. "So you're like a homework helper for grown-ups?" "Something like that," Marcus said with a chuckle. Layla beamed. "I think you're the best mentor ever." Her confidence in him fueled his determination to succeed. The first workshop. The inaugural Horizons workshop took place in a large conference room filled with nervous but eager participants. Marcus kicked off the session by introducing the program's goals and sharing his vision. "Success isn't about where you start," he said, pacing the room. "It's about where you're willing to go and how hard you're willing to work to get there." The day was filled with activities designed to build confidence and foster collaboration. Highlights included team challenges. Groups worked together to solve practical problems, fostering communication and leadership skills. One-on-one coaching. Mentors met with their assigned ments to discuss goals and create personalized development plans. Storytelling sessions. Participants shared their journeys, creating a sense of community and mutual support. Amira approached Marcus during a break, her eyes brimming with emotion. "No one's ever believed in me like this before," she said. "Thank you for giving me a chance." "You earned it," Marcus replied. "Now let's see what you can do with it." Richard's growing admiration. As Horizons gained momentum, Richard became increasingly impressed by Marcus's ability to connect with people and inspire change. During a late-night debrief, Richard said, "You've turned this into something extraordinary, Marcus. I had no idea it would grow this fast." Marcus shrugged. "People are hungry for opportunity. All we're doing is giving them a seat at the table." Richard leaned back, a rare smile softening his features. "You've taught me something important. You can't build a great company without investing in the people who make it run. Investing in the community." Marcus's success with Horizons inspired him to give back even more to his neighborhood. Using funds from a grant Richard helped secure, Marcus launched several community-focused initiatives. Youth Apprenticeship Program. Partnering with local tradespeople to teach young people practical skills like carpentry, plumbing, and auto repair. Small Business Support. Providing resources and mentorship for aspiring entrepreneurs, including workshops on budgeting, marketing, and business planning. Neighborhood Revitalization. Working with volunteers to repair homes, clean up parks, and create safe spaces for families to gather. Evelyn's role. Evelyn, always a champion of Marcus's efforts, became an unofficial advisor for Horizons. She offered guidance to Ments, drawing from her own life experiences, and even hosted a few workshops herself. During one event, she shared a moving story about her late husband's struggles as a young man and how mentorship had changed his life. "Everyone deserves someone in their corner," she said. "Someone who believes in them even when they don't believe in themselves." Her words left a lasting impression, and several Ments approached her afterward to thank her for her honesty and encouragement. challenges along the way. The road wasn't without obstacles. Marcus faced criticism from skeptics who questioned the program's value and encountered resistance from some executives wary of change. One particularly tense moment arose during a meeting when an executive dismissed Horizons as a feel-good PR stunt. Marcus kept his composure but responded firmly. "This isn't about PR. It's about creating opportunities for people who've been overlooked, and that benefits everyone, including this company." His passion silenced the room, earning him quiet nods of approval from several colleagues. Ment's success stories. As months passed, the first class of Horizons Ments began to thrive. Amira landed an internship at a major tech company, setting her on the path to becoming a software engineer. Jamal launched his graphic design business, securing several high-profile clients with the help of his mentor. Tyrone earned a promotion to shift supervisor at a manufacturing plant, gaining the confidence to pursue bigger goals. During a graduation ceremony for the program, Marcus watched with pride as each mentee shared their achievements. "This is what it's all about," Richard said quietly, standing beside him. Marcus nodded. "Helping people believe in themselves and showing them what's possible." Closing scene. A vision for the future. As the program expanded to other cities, Marcus reflected on how far he had come. One evening, as he sat on his porch with Evelyn and Layla, he shared his vision for the future. "I want to keep building," he said. "Not just programs, but a movement. Something that inspires people to lift each other up." Evelyn smiled, her eyes shining with pride. "You're already doing that, Marcus. And I have no doubt you'll keep doing it." Layla hugged his arm, her voice filled with excitement. "Can I be a mentor someday, Daddy?" Marcus chuckled, pulling her close. "You already are, baby girl. You inspire me every day." As the stars lit up the night sky, Marcus felt a deep sense of fulfillment. This was only the beginning of the legacy he was building. A legacy rooted in kindness, integrity, and the power of community. Marcus's growing impact. Horizons had grown beyond what Marcus had imagined. With new chapters opening in multiple cities, the program was helping thousands of individuals find their paths to success. Marcus spent much of his time traveling to oversee the expansion, but he never let the program stray from its original vision: lifting people up through connection, mentorship, and opportunity. During a visit to a newly established Horizons chapter, Marcus spoke to a packed room of Ments. "Each of you has the potential to do something extraordinary," he said, his voice steady but impassioned. "Not because someone handed you a chance, but because you earned it. Take what you learn here and pass it on. That's how we create change. Not just for ourselves, but for everyone." The applause that followed was deafening, but Marcus stayed humble, knowing the real heroes were the mentors and Ments who turned vision into action. Richard's transformation. Richard had changed too. Once laser-focused on profits and corporate dominance, he now saw business as a vehicle for meaningful impact. During a strategy meeting with his executive team, Richard announced a bold new initiative, dedicating 10% of the company's annual revenue to community investment projects. "We've built an empire," he said. "Now it's time to use it for something greater. If you're here just to line your pockets, you're in the wrong room." The decision was met with mixed reactions, but Richard stood firm. His leadership, bolstered by Marcus's influence, had evolved into something driven by purpose rather than ambition. That evening, over drinks in his office, Richard confided in Marcus. "You've taught me more than anyone else ever has," Richard said, swirling the amber liquid in his glass. Marcus chuckled. "I think you've taught me just as much." Richard smiled. "Then we're even." Evelyn's legacy. As Horizons continued to thrive, Evelyn remained an integral part of its success. Though her age slowed her physically, her wisdom and warmth made her an irreplaceable presence at every event she attended. During a celebratory dinner for the program's second anniversary, Evelyn gave an impromptu speech. "When Marcus pulled me out of that fire, he saved my life," she said, her voice strong despite her frailty. But he didn't stop there. He built something that saves lives every day, not by dragging people from the flames, but by giving them the tools to find their way out on their own. Her words brought tears to many eyes, including Marcus's. Challenges along the way. The growth of Horizons wasn't without its hurdles. Marcus encountered resistance from skeptics who questioned the program's scalability and long-term impact. One particularly heated meeting with a potential donor ended with the man dismissing Horizons as idealistic but unsustainable. Marcus stood his ground. This isn't just a program. It's a movement. And movements don't die when they're built on something real. Though the donor ultimately declined, Marcus's conviction inspired others to step up, bringing new supporters to the cause. Layla's journey. Layla, now 10 years old, was blossoming under her father's example. She often attended Horizons events, proudly introducing herself as Marcus's daughter. During one such event, Layla approached a group of men's and began asking questions about their goals. "I want to help people too, just like my dad," she said earnestly. Her presence reminded everyone of the importance of family and community in creating a lasting legacy. A difficult goodbye. The hardest challenge came when Evelyn's health began to decline. Though she faced her illness with grace, the inevitability of her passing cast a shadow over the lives she had touched. Marcus and Richard visited her often, bringing Layla along to brighten her spirits. On a quiet afternoon, Evelyn called Marcus to her bedside. "You've done more than I ever could have imagined," she said, her voice barely a whisper. Marcus took her hand, his throat tight. "I wouldn't have done any of it without you." Evelyn smiled faintly. "Promise me one thing, Marcus. Keep going. Don't let this stop with you." "I promise," Marcus said, his voice breaking. Evelyn passed peacefully that night, leaving behind a legacy of kindness, wisdom, and unwavering belief in the power of people to lift each other up. Carrying on. Evelyn's passing galvanized Marcus and Richard to honor her memory. They renamed the mentorship program Evelyn's Horizons and established a scholarship fund in her name to support aspiring leaders. At the dedication ceremony, Richard spoke from the heart. "My mother believed in people. She believed in their ability to rise above their circumstances and create something beautiful. This program is her legacy, and we're honored to carry it forward." The crowd erupted in applause, and Marcus, standing beside Richard, felt a profound sense of purpose. Community revitalization. Beyond Horizons, Marcus turned his attention to his old neighborhood. With support from Richard and local leaders, he launched a series of community revitalization projects. Affordable housing initiatives, renovating abandoned properties to create safe, affordable homes for families. Education partnerships, collaborating with schools to provide mentorship programs and vocational training for students. Small business grants, offering funding and resources to local entrepreneurs, fostering economic growth and self-sufficiency. The transformation was remarkable. Streets once marked by neglect became vibrant hubs of activity, filled with the sounds of laughter, music, and the hum of progress. Reflection and gratitude. One evening, as Marcus sat on his porch, Layla curled up beside him. He reflected on how far they had come. "Daddy," Layla said, looking up at him, "do you think Grandma Evie can see us?" Marcus smiled, his heart full. "I think she's watching over us right now. Do you think she's proud?" Marcus hugged her close. "I know she is." The story ends with Marcus attending the graduation ceremony for the latest class of Evelyn's Horizons Ments. As he watched them cross the stage, their faces filled with hope and determination, he felt a deep sense of fulfillment. This wasn't just his journey, it was theirs. And as long as people believed in each other, the horizons ahead would always be bright. As the crowd erupted in applause, Marcus turned to Richard, who stood beside him. "To Evelyn," Marcus said, raising an imaginary glass. "To Evelyn," Richard echoed, his voice filled with emotion. Together, they watched the next generation step forward, ready to change the world. 5 years later. The Evelyn's Horizons program had grown into a national movement. What began as a small mentorship initiative had blossomed into an expansive network of programs serving thousands of individuals across the country. With chapters in over 30 cities, the program provided training, resources, and community support to people from all walks of life. Marcus stood on the stage of a packed convention center, addressing a crowd of mentors, ments, and supporters. Behind him, a large screen displayed the program's motto, "Together, we rise." In every city I've visited, in every story I've heard, one truth has become clear, Marcus said, his voice steady and strong. When we believe in each other, there's no limit to what we can achieve. The audience erupted in applause, a standing ovation that filled the room with energy and hope. A personal legacy. After the event, Marcus stepped backstage, where Layla, now a bright and confident 15-year-old, was waiting for him. "Dad, that was amazing," she said, throwing her arms around him. Marcus chuckled. "Thanks, baby girl. But the real stars are out there." "You're one of them," Layla said, pulling back to look at him. "Grandma Evie would be so proud." The mention of Evelyn brought a bittersweet smile to Marcus's face. "We wouldn't be here without her." Layla nodded, her expression thoughtful. "I want to help more, Dad. Maybe start my own project someday." "You will," Marcus said with certainty. "And when you do, I'll be your biggest cheerleader." Richard's evolution. Richard had embraced his role as a changemaker, continuing to push for policies and initiatives that prioritized people over profits. He had stepped back from day-to-day corporate operations, focusing instead on philanthropy and expanding the reach of Evelyn's Horizons. One afternoon, he and Marcus met for lunch at a small cafe near the original mentorship chapter. "You've come a long way," Richard said, raising a glass of iced tea. Marcus smiled. "So have you." Richard leaned back, a rare moment of introspection crossing his face. "You know, for most of my life, I thought success was about climbing higher, reaching further. But you showed me that it's about the lives we touch along the way." Marcus clinked his glass against Richard's. "Here's to touching more lives. The community thrives." Back in Marcus's old neighborhood, the changes were impossible to miss. The youth apprenticeship program had trained dozens of young people, many of whom had gone on to launch successful careers. The affordable housing initiative had turned abandoned buildings into homes filled with laughter and love. Local businesses were thriving, supported by the grants and mentorship Marcus had helped establish. During a community block party, Marcus stood by the grill, flipping burgers while chatting with familiar faces. "You've done something special here," Eddie, his former employee, said as he grabbed a plate. "We did it together," Marcus replied. A visit to Evelyn's resting place. Later that evening, Marcus and Layla visited Evelyn's grave. The headstone was simple but elegant, engraved with the words, "Evelyn Hayes, a life of grace and generosity." Layla knelt to place a bouquet of flowers at the base. "Hi, Grandma Evie," she said softly. "I miss you." Marcus stood silently for a moment, his hands in his pockets. "Thank you," he said, his voice steady, "for believing in me when I didn't know how to believe in myself." As they left, the sky turned a brilliant shade of gold, as if Evelyn herself was smiling down on them, looking toward the future. That night, Marcus sat on his porch, gazing at the stars. Layla joined him, her notebook in hand. "What are you working on?" Marcus asked. "A plan," she said with a grin. "For my own program. I want to help kids who don't have anyone to believe in them. Kind of like you and Grandma Evie did." Marcus's chest swelled with pride. "You're going to do amazing things, Layla." She smiled up at him. "You taught me how, Dad." A bright horizon. The final scene shows Marcus walking into a bustling Evelyn's Horizon Center, where ments are gathered for workshops, interviews, and community events. As he moves through the space, greeting people by name, it's clear that his presence is a source of inspiration and comfort. He stops in front of a mural painted on the wall, a vibrant depiction of a phoenix rising from the flames, with the words, "Every life is worth saving." Marcus touches the mural lightly, a symbol of how far he has come and how much further he intends to go. The camera pans out, showing the thriving center surrounded by a bustling, rejuvenated neighborhood. Marcus steps forward, his head held high, ready to face the next challenge.